All right, let's fire the starting gun, get this race underway. Hopefully it's the start of many races to come over the next few months. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon if you might be across the Tasman joining us, or people signing in. We sometimes get people from Asia joining us. I'm Chris Robb. I'm the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be joining you again for this AMPSEA Webinar update. Really critical theme today, that the time is now to save the mass participation industry, and I'm really honored and delighted to be joined by a hugely esteemed panel. We have three four-time Olympians here. Delighted to be joined by Rob de Castella, AO, MBE, former world marathon record holder and world champion, as I said, four-time Olympian, former director of the AIS, so knows a huge amount about sport in our country, in Australia. Founder and director, Indigenous Marathon Foundation, Smart Start for Kids, and Deek's Health Food. Welcome, Deek. Good to see you.
Thanks, Chris. Great to join you.
Thanks for making your time. And sitting alongside in Canberra, James Khan, Deadly Running Australia Manager at Indigenous Marathon Foundation. Thanks for joining us, James. Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me here.
And then we have Benita Willis, four-time Olympian as well, world cross-country champion, gold medalist, and recreational manager for Queensland Athletics, as well as being on the World Athletics Athletes Commission. Welcome, Benita.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Thanks a lot for having me.
Nice to see you. And an old friend, Steve Moneghetti, AM, also four-time Olympian, Commonwealth Games gold medalist, lots of other hats that Mona wears. Great to see you, Mona.
Nice to see your smiling face, Chris. Hi, everyone. Welcome everyone out there as well. Look forward to chatting today.
And then we have Wayne Hickson, who is the MD of Hickson Media, joining us from the Queensland, Brisbane, I believe. Wayne, is that correct?
On the Gold Coast.
Gold Coast, yeah, fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Wayne. So folks, just quickly, a bit of housekeeping before we get formally underway. Please keep yourself mute. As I mentioned, there will be opportunities for Q&A, probably easier from a time perspective if you just put those in the chat. Also, if you unmute yourself, we get a whole bunch of feedback and we can hear your dogs barking and your children screaming. So do us a favor and do that. We've allocated an hour, so we've got about 55 minutes or so of that left. We're going to go through a discussion around the panelists. We've got four main buckets that we're going to focus on. Obviously, our industry is being decimated. Our industry is being decimated across the world. The only word to use is decimated. The statistics coming out of the US are 75% of the industry is not going to return there next year. Our statistic is over 50. We're a little bit more fortunate than them. But the time is now to help try and save this industry and the massive impact it has on the health and well-being of communities in Australia, in this case, and across the world. So we are recording it as well. We have some friends from the media here that are hopefully going to help us amplify the story. We will be sharing lots of outtakes from this. We'd hope to stream it on Facebook as we normally do, but for some reason there's a technical hitch. It's not allowing me to do that, but we will post it on various YouTube channels, the recording. But with that said, why don't we get underway? And I'm going to throw to you to start, Wayne, to just please set the scene for us, give us a sense. You're obviously a supplier that's been hugely impacted. There's many elements of this industry that are on their knees at the moment, and I'd love you to set the scene for us, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And the urgency in your voice a moment ago is quite valid. This is a real national emergency, if you like. I've been a supplier, a media consultant supplier to major events in Australia for the past 2 decades. And quite frankly, I hardly worked at all since March this year. It was so sudden. But as a media consultant, a media supplier, I get to touch, I suppose, every part of the industry, every supplier in this industry. I've been the media consultant to the Gold Coast Marathon for the past 2 decades, as I say. I've actually, with this esteemed panel here, I found it a lot easier to write about marathons and run in the bloody thing. So I learned that early. But there's an event. It brings thousands of people to Australia, not just the Gold Coast. They come from all over the place. That just didn't happen this year. And if you look at the stats, Chris, I mean, and this is the AMPSEA membership is telling us this. These aren't made up figures. This is proper decent surveys. $1.1 billion loss to the industry. That's just this year. We've lost 1.1 billion. There are 19,000, or in excess of 19,000 mass participation events across Australia that have been cancelled this year. Just not happening. 11,000 jobs lost. I'd say that's conservative. I'll talk about the supply chain in a moment. 3.4 million Australians aren't participating in events this year, and that's just stunning. And that's what these things are all about. And I know with Benita, Deacon Moners, it's all about getting people to off their couches and into these events and fitness and health and mental well-being and all that. And we will talk a lot about that as we go through, but it's significant. And $75 million lost to Australian charities. Again, I think that's a little bit conservative because I know the events that I'm involved in put heavy accent on charitable benefit from all of those. So it is a thing. The other thing too, with my background, I work with the Pan Pacific Masters Games. You can see behind us, that had to skip a year, and that's 12,000 competitors that just didn't have their sports tourism experience this year. Coming back in November next year, thankfully. But the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games a couple of years ago, and I know Moneghetti and Benita all involved with that as well. I was involved with the bid in 2011, and one of the big anchors to the bid, and one of the things I think that got us over the line in the final count, was that the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games would leave a legacy of participation. So that we'd build stadiums, we'd have events that would include participation of young people, but right through the community. We just wanted people to participate in events, and it was going so well. It was actually flying between 2018 and the end of the games and the beginning of this year. But so many of those events are just not happening at the moment as well. And it's just been really sad to see. When I've spoken to politicians and at all levels, local, state and federal, there's always that little blame shift. Is that, we'll talk to the state government, we'll talk to local government, whatever. But this is a national emergency, and I'm not exaggerating by saying that. This is a national thing. And to give another example, when we ran the Commonwealth Games, I was pretty close to a lot of the contracts, the supplier contracts, and we found that we couldn't get everything in Queensland. We had to bring seats up from Melbourne. We had to bring portaloos in from other states, all those sort of things. We just don't have those supply chains. The Australian supply chain for events isn't that big that it can take a year off and be fine. It runs on a fairly thin wedge, and that's been really hard for a lot of suppliers. I talk to people that do the fencing at schoolies every year. Now, schoolies isn't happening on the Gold Coast, but there's 5 kilometres of fencing that contractor hasn't got this year. And we're talking big dollars, stages on the beach and all those sort of things. I suppose it's the ultimate mass participation event where you've got 23,000 kids just going on Tropo for a week. But there is a massive supply network there that I get to see that those people are struggling. And again, that 11,000 jobs lost. I'd say JobKeeper's been great, that sort of thing, but it needs more. We've AMPSEA's put it out there that if the federal government could help with $48 million, that would help get these events back up. It would help COVID safety events, which costs money, and it would help insulate, I suppose, the losses that have happened this year. So I suppose that's my pitch from the industry sector. The 2032, the Queensland Olympic bid is still on the table. Just a little bit on hold with Corona. I think that the attention's been elsewhere. But there again, we need events to be happening now to prop up that bid, to say, hey, we, thick or thin, we put on some of the best events in the world in this country. And it's just the quicker we can get back on track with that, the better, I think. So Chris, I'll hand back to you if that's okay.
Thanks for that, Wade. While you've been talking, sorry, a lot of echo there. Okay, it's gone back. While you were talking, Chris Heffernan put in the chat that if you add in the regional tourism impact, it's $5 billion loss of revenue. And I think it's really interesting. We can track this economic impact, which our industry typically does. But the part that is very difficult to track is the impact on health and well-being. And we just released at the MPW Online Summit a couple of weeks ago a ripple effect study that we've been doing with a group out of Queensland, the Neuropower group. And the ripple effect of mass participation events is absolutely astounding in terms of the depth of impact of one person participating in a marathon or a running event or a triathlon has on their community, and literally extends to millions. We use Singapore Marathon as an example often 40,000 Singaporeans running. And when we sat down with Peterborough to start the study, our sense was that we would maybe be able to prove that it impacted 400,000 people. The initial studies, which is all desktop research, and we'll go into a much more detailed research for early next year, is that actually impacts several million people, and it ripples way beyond the borders of Singapore even, and exactly the same would be the case for Australia. So this unquantifiable, and the point that you're making, and we've already said, of sections of the industry disappearing. If we lose 50% of the Australian industry, when we come back, this demand and the need for health and well-being of the community is not even going to be able to be served because we don't have enough people to deliver those events, let alone the charities that are going out of business. And on that note, why don't we throw across to you, Deke and James, to give it your perspective, and obviously all the panelists are going to chip in there, but from a charity perspective, you're obviously involved in a fantastic initiative, and how have you been impacted, and what are you seeing from that perspective, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Wayne. And I mean, it's had a massive impact on our foundation, the Indigenous Marathon Foundation, and you know, this is our 10-year anniversary, and we had such incredible plans to showcase and celebrate the last 10 years of work that we've done right across Australia, from little remote communities up in Arnhem Land and in the APY lands to all of the country regional towns, and the major capitals and the major cities, and then all of a sudden, sort of the rug got pulled out from under us. We scrambled very early on, and we're tossing up whether our whole IMP program of selecting. Normally we select 6 men and 6 women, 18 to 30-year-olds, and train them for 6 months and take them into training camps where they do education, and then we'd normally take them to New York, and they'd run the New York City Marathon, sort of last weekend or weekend before last. So sort of all of that just got scrapped, and we'd already selected most of the squad early in the year. So we went out to them and said, look, it's unlikely that we're going to go to New York this year. Do you still want to be part of the program? And to their credit, they all said yes, they do. We increased the numbers from 12 to 16 because we knew it was going to take its toll, and they stuck with us because they said it's not just about going to New York; it's about driving the health and the social outcomes that our foundation is really focused on. But it's been an incredibly tough year. Normally we have 4 education and training camps, and they align with the major events. They align with the Gold Coast Marathon. They align with the City to Surf in Sydney, and they obviously didn't take place. There was no domestic travel, and it wasn't. There was no opportunity for our squad who have not come from a running background. They don't know what a fun run is, let alone what's like the Sydney City to Surf is. So they never had an opportunity to experience the whole sport of mass participation running. But to their credit, we ended up getting 12 into Alice Springs last week. But talking to them, they were so close to giving up. Normally they're just so motivated and driven and inspired. But the impact of not having any mass participation events has been devastating and incredibly testing and challenging. And it's really just a credit to them that we were able to get them all to run a marathon that we ended up putting on ourselves in the outskirts of Alice Springs, a midnight full moon marathon in the desert outside of Alice, and that was an incredible event. But we have to find a way to expose them to mass participation. From the charity perspective, we rely on fundraising through the charities. We rely on our supporters running and raising money and getting sponsored by their family and their businesses and stuff. So that's all been taken out of our income stream. So we've had to really struggle to keep things going as a charity, and there are so many other charities that are in exactly the same situation. But we need as quickly as possible to re-establish these mass participation events so that we can deliver the outcomes, because we're about obviously promoting physical activity and addressing chronic disease, but we're also about bringing people together, and that's one of the big outcomes of the running community, is the opportunity for people to connect and come together as a group and be supported, to have goals to aim for. Virtual runs are great, but I think everyone's sick and tired of virtual runs now, and we need to, as quickly as possible, get events back up and going. Here in Canberra, in 2 weeks' time, we've got our Stromlo Running Festival. It'll be one of the first on the ground running events. We've got sellout crowd, sellout entries, but we've extended it over 2 days, so we've got 900 people running in the 30k and 50k on Saturday, and another 900 running in the 10k trail runs. But we've been able to work within the COVID restrictions to ensure that we meet the safety needs of all participants. So it is possible, absolutely it is possible for us to put events on, and we've seen events occasionally popping up around Australia and overseas. So I think as quickly as possible, we need to the support to these events and the event industry to get things back up and going as soon as we possibly can, and don't be so risk averse that it's easy to sit in an office and just put a cross through an event, but there are ways that events can manage the risks, and we can still provide opportunities for people to join together and participate and get out there and get these events to survive, have these events survive, so that when things do lift, there are still events on the landscape that can be built up again.
That's great feedback about being able to be putting them on safely. There were a number of events that happened in the UK a couple of weeks back, and the post-event surveys from the participants, many of them commented that they felt safer participating. There was a triathlon at Blenheim, and there was a run at Kew Gardens. Participants said they felt safer in those events than they did going down the street to the shopping centre. Sorry, James, I interrupted you there. Karen?
You're right, Chris. I guess I just wanted to, add to what Rob said so well. Obviously, you mentioned there ripples, and we always talk about the ripple effect of our foundation and what we do in the community through running, and running is such a powerful tool. Steve Mono will talk about the effect on mental health, and one of the things that we see a lot is the impact that running has on mental health in the Indigenous community. So Deadly Running, we've got 40 plus groups around Australia, varying sizes up above 200. A lot of those groups, they are the connection with their community, they're the connection with their families. They are so much more than running. They're a huge tool towards improved mental health. I had a couple of guys come out to Alice Springs from Adelaide when we were out there for the marathon, and they're talking about not having opportunities, and actually being able to come up to Alice Springs and experience that improved the way in which they were feeling throughout this year. It's been a very dark year for so many, and especially these remote communities where we do operate. And for them to be restricted, and we have events, like I said, up to 200, which the Deadly Running guys they organise, and then they've been restricted as well. If we keep touching on charities, before we were just talking about something like the City to Surf on the biggest events in Australia, who raise over $4 million dollars a year in fundraising for charities, and this year through their virtual event. We're not even close to $1 million. I think it's about 700,000, and that's just one event. There's other events out there that foundations run for themselves. So things like the Humpty Dumpty Foundation, Balmoral Burn. They're looking at usually making close to $2 million a year in both equipment fundraising and cash fundraising, and they do that with a ball as well. They also have City to Surf fundraising, which is around $30,000 a year, and a lot of that just didn't happen this year. So that is another ripple. We see the ripple occurring in so many ways, and it's so negative this year in terms of not having those opportunities for charities, not having those opportunities for communities. It's been really hard, and as Rob pointed out, with our foundation and what we do for our squads, what we do for Deadly Running, has been severely impacted by those opportunities being taken away. The other sort of ripple I want to mention here is, Rob's talking about the Stromlo Running Festival, and it is fantastic that this event has been able to go ahead, but it's a skeleton event. It's, come in, you run, and then you get out. There's no hospitality, there's no merchandise on site, no spectators. So that experience is now being almost taken away. And how long can we sustain that? People going down and doing that once, that might be right, but a lot of people do the fun runs and the mass participation events for the experience. They want to get that shirt, they want to get someone wrapping that medal around their neck, and that's all being taken away through this COVID period. So, as Rob said, we need to, be risk adverse and build confidence in our communities, build confidence in our providers, and really get back out there, because foundations like ours and many others will start to feel the effects of that ripple not occurring through these events.
Thanks, James. And a point we made yesterday when we were talking about your event is, not only are you taking away part of that experience, but you're significantly impacting the suppliers. And Wayne's already spoken to that. So, the marquee suppliers going out of business, the caterers are going out of business, all those people that support. So this massive ecosystem that mass participation creates, it's not just an event organizer, it's sponsors, it's brands, it's suppliers, it builds a whole community, timing companies, barricade suppliers, all those kind of things. That ripple of destruction that's happening is huge. Yeah,
it's a real house of cards, and you all of a sudden, you can't provide the expo or the merchandising opportunities for your sponsors at the event. So how long are they going to hang in there, and how long can they afford to still be involved in the event? And as soon as you start to reduce the support from your sponsors and supporters, then you either increase the cost of entry for the participants, which is a real negative, a real deterrent to them continuing to come along and get involved, or you just go out of business. And that's what we're seeing, I think, at the moment. And we really do need to find ways to get the industry back up on its feet. We need to find ways to support the industry in the interim, so that there is an industry that can come back when we do start to have big mass participation events. And even like James said, it's not always about the tens of thousands of events. In a small Aboriginal community of maybe sort of 500 or 1,000 people, to have 20 or 30 people participating in a little community fun run is a really significant contributor to the health and the well-being within that community. And to just come out and say, okay, no events, you're not allowed to have any events, that's not an option. We have to find a way to work around and still put on safe events within the framework that we operate within.
Thanks, Rob. Why don't we switch over to you, Benita? We've spoken obviously about the charity and the commercial impact, but from a legacy perspective here, grassroots is being impacted. And Rob was even talking about that yesterday. His daughter doing cross country, not being able to progress to a state titles. You're hugely involved with the whole grassroots situation, and obviously tourism impact as well. Would you like to talk to that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I think with the grassroots, Queensland School Sport has cancelled pretty much everything since March, and we're a bit more fortunate being in Queensland in the sense that we haven't had the second lockdown. But these kids, they're at home, they're doing homeschooling, they're on their devices all day, they haven't been allowed outside, and all of a sudden we see that there's no organised sport for them, and they're going to develop these sort of addictions to the screens. And we know that, as kids get into adolescence, their behaviours, their healthy behaviours, they lose that if they're not participating in these events. And we know that a lot of these mass events, they've got brilliant little kids races. We know Gold Coast Marathon's got the biggest kids race in the Southern Hemisphere. And I think it's just a very sad space to be in, that there's nothing out there for kids to participate safely in. And I think once school sport decided, yeah, we're not doing that anymore, I think we need to have a look at some of the studies. I think with what Rob was saying before, some of these bigger events and some of the governments around, they're a little bit, and particularly councils, I think they're a bit scared of sort of letting some of these events go ahead. And I think if we look at that study by the Japan Association of Athletics Federation overseas, there they've done a study that's just recently come out, and with over 500,000 participants and about 100,000 officials, they've found that there's only been one case of COVID in the 2 weeks following an event. So I think that sort of research, as it comes out, it shows that these events, and you get people moving along, they're not congregating in big areas, and they're outside. I think they're a lot safer than what some of the councils, like we know we've got different councils in Queensland have different rules for some of these events, which has been really challenging as well. So we want to get these kids active and healthy and doing stuff that they love. But also I had to think about these major events. They're a family affair as well. So, you know, we're out on the families, like the mum and dad coming on for a shorter race. And, you know, I was even at Ultra Trail Australia last year, which is predominantly a 50 and 100K event. And, you know, the kids, they had a 1K run too. So, you know, we're stopping these family traditions as well. And I think the longer this lasts, I know there was a study in the US that surveyed a lot of parents, and now thinking when COVID's done, 30% of them are saying their kids and they might not be involved in physical activity and mass participation events. So I think the longer it's out of people's routine and they start doing other things and they don't bring it back, and we don't want to create generations like and our kids, they're our generation, and that's what we have to look forward going through as a country. And if these habits sustain with the screen time and being inside and getting involved in other things that's not healthy and active, I think we're going to have a real problem. So I think, you know, we have to just be a bit mindful of the sense that and the sense that we need to involve kids, but also these big mass participation events, they're run by professionals. So, you know, we would love them to put on these kids races and get the kids involved, where some of these amateur sort of federations or even school sport, they might not be able to in the sense that they've got more restrictions. I think if we allow these mass participation events to go ahead, we can get the kids active and get it back on the radar for the whole family to be involved in. So I think from that perspective, it's just so important that these events happen. And, you know, we know that they were all cancelled this year. Queensland's had a lot of little events go ahead, but nothing over kind of 1 to 2,000. So that's stopping a lot of these big events that have all the infrastructure and all the people behind them to go ahead. So yeah, I think my worry is for the kids, and certainly talking about tourism impacts, like $5 billion lost to the local tourism economy. It's terrible. And living here on the Gold Coast, you know, we used to see planes going overhead. I live very close to the airport, so we kind of, yeah, we lose sight of, although the event's not going ahead, what are the knock-on effects of these events not going ahead? And I think about the promotional value of events like Gold Coast Marathon, like Sydney Marathon, Melbourne Marathon. The promotional value, not only it's good for physical and the mental well-being for people, but it also promotes the cities that they're in and promotes people to come and visit them. And we're not seeing any of that. And I know you talked about, Wayne, the Brisbane 2032 Olympics, and the way that a lot of Olympic bids, I know Gold Coast Com Games bid, a lot of these bids work is seeing these big major city marathons. You see them happening. They're very successful, and they become a real focus of these big major events. And I think, you know, winning bids for these major events, that's a knock-on effect of having something even bigger coming to the community and injecting even more money into the community. So I think we're losing out in that sense as well. So I'm very concerned with the tourism, but also just with these events that have everyone behind them. And yeah, it's just so sad. And I know, you know, when I was competing as an athlete, there was always opportunities for elite athletes, and a lot of elite athletes, if they're even looking to qualify for stuff, there's nothing on the radar. And looking back, thinking about grassroots sport as well, like some of these big events, I know PenPac Masters Games, it injects $1 million back into grassroots sports, and that's just one event that that we can look at. So we don't always think as mass participation events just being people running their race. There's so many knock-on effects, and even with the charities that Rob and James were talking about before, like I feel for the people that run for a charity for their mental health, and they run for someone, and they don't do the race because they just do the running part. They do it for another reason, and that's been just taken away without a side fee for charities. So I think that avenue of mental health is something that we've just taken away from people. So yeah, I think my biggest concern is for children, but for families not developing those really important traditions that we can go forward with, but also the promotional value of these events in the major cities that they're held in.
Great insights. Thanks, Benita. And I think, the whole device thing exacerbated by the fact that most kids' education in many parts of the world has gone online now. And I think, that's a lot in a lot of parts of Australia. So, I was talking to someone, I live in Bali. I was talking to a mother the other day. Her 6-year-old daughter is spending 6 hours a day on online education. And then she's got no sport to do in the afternoon. And she's potentially, spending another 2 or 3 hours on a device doing other things. And, we spend all these hours trying to stop our kids from using it. Exercise is a great example of taking them out there and getting them away. Interestingly, just wanted to touch on one before we throw across to Mona. Potentially politicians are sitting there and saying, anecdotally, running has exploded across the world and cycling's exploded. You hear of bike shops that, have sold out of stock. And politicians might be sitting there and saying, well, look at what's happening. You're telling us you need these people to get involved in events, and there's so many people out there running anyway. But the point that you made, and has been made a number of times, that people have this target to aim for. I'm running in the Gold Coast Marathon because I'm raising money for charity. And, my worry is that politicians are sitting there saying, it's okay. There's lots of active people. You keep telling us that getting them in events makes them active. My belief is that once COVID goes away and people lose the excuse to get out and run to escape from COVID, they don't have these events to train for. They don't have the targets. And obviously, we've already heard of the knock-on impact from a tourism and charity perspective. Mona, let's use that as a segue to come to you around the mental health side of things. Thanks, Benita.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, fantastic passion. I love, I think we're all been involved and impacted, but I love the passion that people have for this industry. And, we see it firsthand when we're at the events. So, I think we all understand the physical benefits of, training up for an event, and then, when you're involved in the event itself. But I'm really conscious of the mental health and well-being, and we're naturally competitive people, so being in an event, you get that kind of wanting to run a PB, and I think that's motivation within itself. So, but also just being in a big group, there is something about the equality in mass participation events that, I didn't notice this. I've been involved for a long time. I'm thinking everyone that comes to an event wants to be up the front and wants to win. But having been involved in the industry for so long, it is far from that. And Benita spoke about, the kids being involved, families. Rob and James mentioned, the Indigenous aspect and the positivity and just the feel-good nature of being involved in these events. Mass participation events, everybody understands, they're for everybody. Old, young, women, we're seeing so many females. There's a higher percentage of involvement now of females in mass participation events. So, and you see so many ladies out training. I see it. I've noticed over the last 15 years, the increase in women participating in these events has been fantastic. So the number of wheelies, paras, so we're crossing across all aspects of the community. Everyone is involved. We're all in this together. And I think we underestimate that social aspect of these events. And of course, just the release you get just being out training. So, if you're not, getting out in the fresh air, Ballarat, I'm pretty lucky. We get to run out in the forest, but the actual benefit you get in just clearing your hair, just the release you get from the daily work grind if you're out training, and you have to have these events as the motivation to get out to do that training in the first place. So that's what you're motivated for. I think we've all seen that motivation and feel that, whether you're up the front, you're up the back, the PBs that you want to run to get out and train and prepare for these events is really significant. And then in the event itself, you push really hard, you get the endorphin release, and we've all experienced that runner's high, and it is an unbelievable sense of satisfaction. And I say you don't get that in other aspects of your life unless you've done it. I talk to people who have done these events, and we share this sort of bond. There's something about that runner's high that you get that you don't get in other areas. You can't get that in the workplace. You can't get that by going to a rock concert. You can get it by being involved in an event. And, people cross the finish line. Like Rob, James and Benita, we all know you get the medal, but you also share the war stories. Oh, thanks for helping me out. Geez, I was having trouble at that middle part of the event. How hard was it going up that hill? We got there, and there's a real sense of satisfaction that you share with the people that are involved in that event. And you don't get that when you just go out and just participate, just go for a training run. And the event allows us to train up for that and really enjoy that sense of satisfaction. And the positive affirmation you get from that, Chris, I really want to stress how good that is. So many things in society now are negative. People knock you, they give you a hard time, in the workplace, they're ripping into you, why can't you do that? When you finish an event, we're all on the start line. We run that event. We swim, we ride, we run. We finish it, and there's this. We're all equal. We're all in it together. But there's also a really positive sharing and a positive affirmation about that experience. And I think we underestimate that. And then, as well as that, we've spoken about the charity aspect. Not only raising the money. I'm involved with Run for the Kids. We donate over $1 million to the Good Friday appeal here in Victoria to the Royal Children's Hospital. But it's not the dollar figure, it's also the mental benefit of giving back to the community. So, some people don't want to volunteer at particular for Rotary or be involved in those organisations. This is a way where they can, by participating, they are actually giving back to the community. So there's a really positive sense of satisfaction in doing that as well. So it's not just the dollar figure that we raise, as significant as it is, there's also a feel-good aspect to that. So and then even when you talk about that feel-good attitude, one thing that now I'm involved with events as well that's really significant, the volunteers. We use so many volunteers in mass participation events, and they want to volunteer. They may not get the opportunity to volunteer. Sometimes we're actually stopping people from volunteering. We have so many people wanting to be involved in our events. It's a great way. They don't have to run. You don't have to necessarily be a participant. You can be involved in the event by volunteering, and we give them an environment to volunteer to be able to. And I think there's a real value, and we'll have a big drop off. We're sensing now that COVID has really affected that volunteering aspect. I say to everybody out there, and it crosses borders. This isn't local clubs. This isn't just states. This is a national issue that we want to have events so that we can engage those volunteers again in a safe. We're a very mature industry that we're talking about. We're not just the local school putting on a fun run. We've matured as an industry over the last 20, 30 years. So we've got a very safe environment. So it's a great opportunity to get these volunteers engaged again in that safe environment. And, then you talk about, again, workforce, suppliers. Chris, you mentioned all of the contractors and that aspect as well. Well, we also provide an environment for that will be a good way to get them re-engaged. How are they feeling at the moment? Out of work, looking at the future, they've got no support from the government as to the future of these events. And they're saying, well, it's great having JobKeeper, but actually I don't know if I've got a job to go back to, because until we get these events up and about, I don't have the opportunity to look forward. So there's no kind of future planning. And I think that's the thing that, Rob, we all spoke about, we need to have confidence back in society. So we've got to take a risk. We've got to get out there. We've got to, at some stage, we've got to just bite the bullet and get on with these areas. So, you know, I think we're seeing so many people out in the community exercising. Isn't it so important that we engage those? As B said, you know, got to get those people. If there's no events to go to, well, what happens when so many people are now exercising in various ways? We need to have the forum for these people to be able to get together, and we need to be ready. It's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. Rather than picking up the industry, wouldn't it be fantastic if we can support it now so that we get it through, so that when, you know, when the environment is right, we're up and ready to go. And, you know, I think that's probably what I see as being really important, is that motivation, engaging, and giving an environment that's a positive one for people to be comfortable and feel safe participating in games. You know, to me, it's a no-brainer. You know, we're playing really a significant role in the positive nature and health and well-being of the community, and we play such a strong role in that, you know, we shouldn't underestimate it.
Steve, could I just jump in there as well? Sorry, just to pick up on one thing you said there, Steve, about, you know, the people involved and the volunteers. I mean, we run a real reputational risk in this country as well, because, you know, from Sydney 2000, Australia's had this reputation of being able to organise events like no other country in the world. We've got this amazing reputation, and you guys, you three have been to international events, and how many Australians are there helping organise those events? They're everywhere. You can't get away from us. So we run a real reputational risk if that brain drain is lost because these events are taking too long to get back up. If those people leave the industry, it's going to be slower to get events back up, because you've got a retraining, you know, you've got to put retraining processes in place and that sort of thing. And Steve, just the other thing, sorry, I did jump in there, but the other thing on the volunteers, I mean, there's that national pride, and it started in Sydney, I'm sure. Like, they were telling people, you know, months and months and months after the games, they were telling people that the games are over. You can put your uniform in the wardrobe now, you know. And I still see people walking around the Gold Coast in the game shaper uniform, the volunteer uniform. So that pride is there, and they've now gone for the Commonwealth Games. They're helping us out with the marathon. They're helping the V8 supercars. They just can't volunteer enough. And if all you got to do is cut that circuit, all you got to do is cut that off for 6 months, a year, and you've lost that enthusiasm, that momentum. And so nationally, and for the politicians and what have you, it's a national reputational risk that we could lose that mantle of being the greatest country in the world for organising events. And we know how to do it well. We know how to do them safely. Just give us a chance.
Yeah, it's a really, really great point, Wayne. And you know, coming back to those volunteers, a lot of them are retired folk, and you know, it takes away their purpose in life. I've got a friend in Melbourne whose mum volunteers, and you know, not just in mass participation and other things. She said her mum's really struggling mentally because she's really lost that purpose. You know, many of the younger people in the community have jobs, they have school, they have university, but retirees, this is one of the things that gives them purpose. It gives them that connection. So coming back to that mental health thing, really important. And I think, you know, Steve, you made a really great point for me there, that we're a mature industry, and the part that I've struggled with globally on this from day one is just these contradictions in terms of the rules that are out there. You know, someone put in the chat, Roan Day, 25,000 people at a Boxing Day test is okay, but you know, we're only allowed 250 or 500 people at a mass participation event, when our participants are telling us across the world that they feel safer participating in a mass participation event than they do go shopping. You know, I watched the Bledisloe Cup at the last two Bledisloe Cups, you know, Sydney and Brisbane. Supposedly that was a socially distanced events, and you know, I come from the industry. Sorry guys that were organising that, but I couldn't for a moment work out what the social distancing plan in that stadium was. You had your empty blocks over here and 30 people sitting together here and 2 people spaced out there. You know, we have this ability. People are going in one direction. They get on a start line. They go forward. You know, even if we have to accept what Rob and his team are doing in Canberra at this stage with, you know, no celebrations at the finish, at least it's a step back in the right direction, as opposed to mass participation stands at the back of the queue in every element. So, you know, from a funding perspective, you see arts getting funding, you see live events in other spaces are getting funding. My understanding is that in New Zealand, the government has specifically given funding to the mass participation event. Why is the Australian government just ignoring everything that's being asked of them in in this situation. So not even giving us the opportunity to be masters of our own destiny by putting our events on. They're taking that right away from us, and then they're refusing to even give us some funding to support us by taking that away.
Yeah, and again, I think we're all, I'm only saying what we're all thinking, but we worried about becoming a nation of spectators. We're encouraging people to spectate rather than participate. 25,000 at a Boxing Day test, you can guarantee Formula One's going to go, Oz Open, so I can't see that, we're encouraging people to go to that type of event, and yet we're not. For the health and well-being of this society, and you'll see that on the back page of the sports paper where they're covering the Grand Prix, and on the front page will be, major crises in Australia health because our kids are not exercising. Well, come on, you can't have it both ways. Well, let's get some love in here.
Yeah. And just building on that whole thing about the industry, we've been doing wave starts for decades at mass participation events. The participants are used to starting and running in waves, and that's what we're doing here at Stromlo. We've got 900 people participating, but we've got wave starts of 100 to 200, 20 minutes apart. So it is possible for us to use the really sophisticated approaches that are a part of mass participation and just build on those, because participants are used to doing it.
And also, like these major events, they need like 6 months lead in time to start organising for next year. And when there's no confidence in the industry and what's happening, and you look at the employees in these mass participation events, like not only the people that are still employed, but the people that have been let off. So when these mass participation events go ahead and they're given their all clear and they have to rehire again, do they have to retrain a lot of people? A lot of these other people, they're trying to get jobs in other areas. We're looking at the mental health of those employees that had been let off, but also the ones that are still in a job thinking, I'm not sure what's going to happen with my job and everything next year. So we need to give them the confidence that these mass participation events are going to go ahead next year, because otherwise it's just everything's in jeopardy. And these big events, they can't hold on forever. There just needs to be that lead in time, and that's what I'm really concerned about. And mental health is a huge one that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about within these organisations. There's just so many people affected.
Yeah, and we're really lucky here in Australia. I mean, it's going to be a long time before big events start to, like New York City Marathon and these events come back. But within Australia and maybe, even across the Tasman in New Zealand, there are some wonderful opportunities for us to get this industry back up. And building on your point, Bea, I mean, there does need to be some commitment, because to put on an event, you do need to have some certainty, and you do need to be able to lock it in and have that event on the calendar so people can actually then start to sign up and aim for it and build their training towards it. So we really do need to provide some certainty to the industry so that these events can get back up and going as quickly as possible.
It's a great point, Robin. I think, maybe one of the things that the broader community and governments don't understand is that, the challenging business model that mass participation operates under. A lot of people stand out there and they do these mental calculations, 10,000 participants at X number of dollars, those people must be driving around in BMWs and Mercedes and making a fortune. The fact is that this industry is, very grassroots, whilst it's very mature to Mona's point, and, there are a few, bigger organizations. It's made up of a lot of grassroots, smaller organizations, people that have been around organizing events for 15, 20 years with staff of 5 or 6. But, eking out a living, they're doing it, they're passion projects. There's, the passion that's coming through on this panel is symptomatic of what we see in our industry. And those people are doing this to contribute. And at the end of the day, the event organizer stands at the end of the queue with their hand out, picking out a few cents and a few dollars, having taken all of the commercial risk, all of the reputational risk, all of the legal and liability risk to put on these events with little government help along the way. Governments tend to be increasing, venue charges and all that kind of stuff. And the industry has been increasingly struggling in terms of a really realistic, commercially viable business model. And this has just completely sideswiped it. And I think it's maybe a good time to bring in one of the questions we had ahead was from Dennis Passer, who's on the call. Thanks for joining us, Dennis. Does your group feel some of the sporting events restrictions, particularly in Victoria, were too strict and that local and state governments did not consider the ramifications of their decisions on the mental health of competitors or the financial implications for local municipalities and charities? Or are you looking to the future, not wanting to blame on what has happened? I mean, I think that that's pretty much been answered already, but, you know, does anyone want to have a direct response to that question?
I think just sort of leading on a little bit from what you've said as well, Chris, and to I think was it Dennis, did you say Dennis's point? I think what we need is we need leadership from the top, because what's happening at the moment is, and Beast, we've spoken about it, we need some lead time, permits from local councils, you know, just getting permits and confidence in a city of Melbourne to give us a permit to run an event at the end of March. It is tough because we've got, how are they at the moment? Because there's no confidence from a national perspective about events getting going. So I think that coordination and that support would really filter down and allow the confidence to get back that, oh, gee, these events are okay and we've got a permit to run. We can start at least then planning forward and trying to get a bit more engagement from support. At the moment, it's all very disparate. You know, there's lots of what we've spoken about, the broad spectrum of people who are affected and are involved in a mass participation event. And yet at the moment, we can't sort of coordinate them together because there's no certainty within what the future holds for a mass participation event.
Yeah. And I think, you know, none of us want to see unnecessary risk. You know, the last thing we want to see is another wave. And you know, we're absolutely committed to ensuring that every participant participates in a safe way. But it would be nice to have the approach that that there is a general commitment from government, councils, state, federal government, to support and get the industry back as quickly as possible. Because I think at the moment it feels the opposite. It feels as though it's adversarial, that you're having to fight against the local municipalities and the local regulations just to try to justify your event. So I think we can find ways still to do events that are incredibly safe and don't put participants at risk and don't contribute to increasing the risk of another wave, but still provide the opportunity for the industry to survive and continue, and to provide the opportunity for the mental health and the physical health and well-being of the community to get the benefits from having these events coming back as quickly as possible. So it'd be nice just to have government come out and say, absolutely, we want these events to get back as quickly as possible. Let's work with the industry, rather than feeling as though they're working against us and they're just being absolutely risk averse without acknowledging the consequences, both the economic consequences and the health and well-being consequences of just pulling the rug out from under the industry.
Because just sorry to sort of overtake the conversation, but following on from that point, you know, I think that the governments are saying we want people to go out to regional areas, we want to go to cafes, we want people to go out. They're begging for people to go out and support industry now. Your event, Rob, and I know anecdotally, I'm sure we've all got examples, people are craving wanting to get back to events. We've got events that are ready to go. We've got a public that wants to be involved in them. What's the logistical, you know, hold up in the middle that's stopping these two things coming to fruition? That's why we're on this call. We're all frustrated. We're all passionate about how important these events are. And yet there's roadblocks there that we're just not quite getting over the line. And, you know, the longer we wait, the bigger the obstacle becomes. And you know, the industry we've spoken about is mature, it's advanced, and we want to keep it. And the longer we wait, as B says, day by day, people are dropping out of the industry and losing confidence. So we need to get going. This is you know, now, not next week, not next month, not next year. It's now. Time is now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, yeah.
Benita, Karen?
Oh, just saying, and with these events, we need them in viable numbers for the events to go ahead at a profitable margin, not just for the event, but for the community around it. And we can't just have you know, local councils giving permits for events that are 200 people. We need these big events to go ahead, and I think that's the real issue. And these events are not viable if they can only have a couple of thousand people, if they normally have 20, 30,000. So I think that's a really big issue that we need the lead-in time. It's just so important.
Yeah. And Chris, the other thing too, in the context of the question, mental health was mentioned in the question specifically. I get a bit frustrated sometimes watching the coronavirus sort of narrative where they talk about retail, the stock market, they talk about recovery and all this sort of thing. And mental health always just seems to be a little add-on at the end sometimes. It seemed to come to the party late. I'm not quite sure that the emphasis that this panel gives the mental health, the benefits of mental health for these events, I'm not sure if that's received in political circles as well as much as it should be. It just does seem to be an add-on in the conversation, the coronavirus conversation.
I think that's a great point, Wayne, because I think everybody knows that throughout COVID and as we come out of it, that mental health is going to be a major issue. Now, we all acknowledge that. We're actually providing we're part of the solution to that. So by engaging, by letting people participate in these events, we are helping to see, people can benefit from being involved. So I think everyone understands that it's a big issue, but we're actually providing some support to move forward on it rather than just acknowledge it, but do something about it, and we're a part of that solution.
Yeah, we're at the prevention side of it.
Yeah,
and it's wonderful.
correct.
It's wonderful to see the government investing into treatment programs for mental health and increasing, Pat McGorry's funding and all this sort of stuff, and absolutely critical and really important. But wouldn't it be so much better to stop people actually having to go and have counselling by improving their mental health as a consequence of participation in the physical activity that we all know not only addresses every single chronic disease, but also mental health and well-being as well. So let's look at the prevention, and that'll take the load off the services that are out there that are already overloaded. So prevention's got to be the way that we go. And the industry has just that critical role to play in preventing people struggling with their mental health and well-being.
Yeah, great point, Rob. Folks, we're pretty much out of time, so I'm going to wrap it up. I think we've covered pretty much every comment or question. One quickly here from Matt Moore, which is really telling. I'm a coach in the obstacle racing space, and almost overnight, thousands of people lost motivation to train when things were cancelled. So that whole point about having an event to train towards. Rowan Day, need to make the distinction between mass participation sports and mass sit on your butts and watch sports. Again, a great point that well articulated there. Martin Lambert, if the event goes ahead, people will utilize cafe, bar, restaurants in the area. GIFT people want to support local business and encourage events to go on. I think, we've got some really great points here. I'm going to come back and wrap. I just want to put in one little plug. As I shared, I'm the founder and CEO of Mass Participation World. We've been working very closely with AMPSEA and we're kind of a global collaborator of bringing people together. There's AMPSEA equivalents happening all over the world. And tonight we have MPW web series happen every Thursday night. You can find the details if you follow me on LinkedIn or the Mass Participation World Facebook page. Tonight, a really interesting one. Chris Heaven, the chairman of AMPSEA, is going to be joining us. We have the American Endurance Sports Alliance going to be joining us. Carl McLaughlin, who's the CEO of Tough Mudder. We have the Canadian Endurance Sports Coalition joining us. We have the sales director of Register Now joining us. And we have Tom Kerry, who's from Limelight Sport in London, representing the UK Alliance. And we've got an hour session sharing updates, what their learnings are, changing strategies happening all over the world, because we're all starting to get really desperate as we've shared. And if you're interested in tuning in, as I say, they happen every Thursday, but tonight one is particularly relevant to what we've spoken about today. So a fantastic session. A huge thank you to everyone. So many points that I could pick out, but there's a couple that I've noted, and I love the one from Rob. We've got to stop being adversarial and cooperative. It feels like we're adversarial. We're having to fight for every step of the way with government, whether that be at federal level all the way down to council level. You know, events like the Noosa Triathlon getting a tick all the way through and then being knocked back at local council level. You know, thousands of people making an economic impact in the region. The whole, and it's come through so many times, mental health. We are the prevention. We're not the cure. We're the prevention. We're the opportunity to stop putting people into those situations. And I think a really great point that Mona meant, the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to rescue that business. As the title of the session, the time is now. We need the government to sit up and take notice. It's not just about funding, it's funding, and it's giving us the opportunity to get back to business so we can make a massive impact on the health and well-being of communities and the economic impact on businesses, both regional Australia and in major cities. So a huge big thank you, as I see them on my screen. Benita Willis, Wayne, thank you so much. Steve Moneghetti, Rob D. Castella.
Well done.
Sorry.
James.
Wayne, sorry,
James.
James. Sorry, James. I had a momentary senior moment there. Thank you so much for you making your time. Thanks for those of you that have tuned in, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you on a start line somewhere soon. Good luck for your event, Rob and James.
Okay, thanks,
Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for hosting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.